Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course that makes this Circles and Squares, a PlayStation podcast. And Kate, can you believe somehow we're already doing our 5th episode?
I know, and the craziest part is like people are actually listening.
I know. Well, I mean, yeah, it's a really cool thing. You know, this is our first. For those that don't know, the first 4 episodes were recorded kind of in bulk, so we could have a bit of a catalog of episodes for listeners when we were just releasing our show. But this is the first one we've actually been together to record since those episodes came out, and it's pretty cool to have seen the reception, and like people seem to like what we've done so far.
Yeah, we're absolutely humbled by everyone who's been listening, so thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And, absolutely. Honestly, it's not like we're hitting the big times right now or anything, but seriously, like we've had a lot more than I've anticipated, in terms of reception. So like, thank you all very, 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 very much for listening and supporting us however you do. Excited to do number 5?
Very excited to do number 5, and 5 is the perfect episode number for today as well, because I have amazing news for everybody. I finished Persona 5.
Wow, this is a good episode for that, because I also finished Final Fantasy 7.
Yes, and
Remake.
I think coincidentally we finished it on the same night.
No, we did. It's funny because I think I was texting you because I always text you for Persona updates, right? It's
yes,
I wonder how Kate's doing in Persona like every few days. And then it just happened to be the same night you were like, I think I'm going to beat it. And I was in the middle of like one of the final chapters of Final Fantasy, and it was getting late, but I was like, you know what? Like, I think I'm going to beat Final Fantasy 2. And it was kind of a cool, the stars aligned, you might say.
Mm-hmm. It was one magical Thursday evening, let me tell you.
Yeah. We're going to get to those games in just a second, but before we do, the show today is going to be the games we've been playing for the first segment. We're then going to get into a news summary for the two big state of plays that Sony's done recently. Just if last time the Ghost of Tsushima did their big state of play reveal just the day after we recorded our last episode, so we missed that. Then we're going to go over it this show, and then also The Last of Us 2 had its final showing as well with a state of play just today. Actually, we just watched it before starting to record. And then for the third segment, Kate, you gave me a quiz a few episodes ago, which was phenomenal, and I don't know if I'll top it, but I do have one prepared for you to see if you can try and beat my score. So I'm excited to give you that later on.
Thank you. I've been anticipating it all week.
Me too. And trust me, it's tough to make these things, like it's so hard to think like, is this too unfair to ask, or is it reasonable? Like, so you might get 10 out of 10, or it might be like impossible. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no in between.
You'll have to wait and see. But we'll get into that later. For now, Kate, how about you tell me about Persona 5?
Well, it was an absolute behemoth of a game. I clocked in at 117 hours to complete it, which is probably one of the longest playthroughs I've ever done of a game.
It's got to be, right?
It was dense. But I have to say that it was an absolute masterpiece. And I will say it's one of the most consistent games I've ever played in terms of like the quality from where the game started and where the game ended. It's really hard to talk about this without giving spoilers.
Yeah, well, it's such a story-heavy game, right?
Yes, it's so story-driven, and so many of the satisfying conclusions to the game are those story beats that you've been kind of trying to piece together and puzzle out through the entire game. There's a lot of mysteries that happen. Some of to do with like character identities that don't get revealed to the end, or one of the main things in the story is that you learn at the beginning is that one of your companions betrays you and kind of sells you out. And the game is sort of told from the perspective of like being in the past, and you're recounting the escapades of the Phantom Thieves to someone who's interrogating you, and then eventually you catch up in present time. So from the beginning that someone that's in your party has sort of like sold you out and betrayed you, but you don't know who it is. So you kind of spend the entire game with that in the back of your mind, and you're trying to like solve that mystery as you go.
Yeah, and the game doesn't really give you anything obvious to go on. Like a lot of times partway through a game you can be like, well, it's definitely this, like it's so obvious, they've shown me basically. But Persona does a good job of like you may play through the game and not even really think about it for the majority, I think.
Yeah, it's sort of easy to lose track of, but for me anyway, it was always in the back of my mind. I was trying to figure it out, and I did eventually come to a conclusion, and I had a guess in my mind of who I thought it would be. But what was really cool about it, that was like I felt like almost every character, like under the right circumstance, it could be possible that it was them.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, because every character is flawed in some way.
Yeah, they're all flawed, or like they could have had some kind of like given the right context, they could have been pressured into it and like something they would have prioritized over their like loyalty towards you. So I ended up coming up with a guess for one character who ultimately was wrong. And it ended up being a character that I didn't suspect in the slightest. But then once the reveal happened, it sort of like pieced together all these small clues that you could have gathered or on your second playthrough would be like a lot more present for you.
Yeah.
So it was really neat. It was a great like kind of like big reveal for some of these things where it was cathartic because it still made sense, but it wasn't obvious. Like some games, you know exactly who, like that guy's secretly evil, obviously, and you see it like 30 hours before it actually gets revealed.
Well, especially when it's such a time commitment to get through this game. Like you'd hate it if the payoff wasn't worth, the time you put in. Yeah,
exactly. So I have almost nothing but good things to say about this game. I think the style and the theme were amazing. I love obviously I don't want to spoil too much, but I love the 7 deadly sins motif that played throughout it and all the little like occult references, and it was just so cohesive as a game. The final boss, I will say, was a little bit easier than I anticipated, especially since there's a few fights leading up to it that are, I think, a lot more challenging.
Yeah.
So I found the final boss kind of easy, but at the same time it was so thematic and like such an absolutely beautiful arena that they gave you. The art style throughout the game is, it's so stylish.
It's unparalleled.
I've never seen a game that just has like this sort of like atmosphere and like dripping ooze of style that's so unique. But the final boss kind of like almost had its own style that was different from the rest of the game, and it was absolutely gorgeous. Like I looked at that and like probably didn't even play the final battle for the first like 2 minutes of it, because I just listened to the music and looked at the boss and I was like, this is like,
it's something
absolutely
else, right?
gorgeous.
It's a spectacle.
It is. And it had some really cool mechanics, I thought, that sort of like really kept you on your toes throughout the fight. So I think that did a good job to mitigate that it wasn't the most challenging, but it really was very interesting and actually quite a unique fight compared to a lot of the other bosses.
Yeah, I think it really does stand out compared to like the other stuff, like you said. So it's not one of the harder bosses, I think, but it's definitely like if you mess up, you're still gonna die.
Yeah, exactly. I think like it was just fun. Like it was good. My only complaint right near the very end is I think it was a little bit long of an ending. Like they go full JRPG ridiculous on you at the end, which like maybe you should have seen coming. But I sat down to play it, and maybe this is partially my fault because maybe I should have just done it in 2 sittings. But I sat down, it was maybe like 10 o'clock, and I was like, okay, I'll play it. I'll probably be done around midnight. I finished and went to bed at 2:30. So like maybe that was my fault. Maybe there were some points I could have just like stopped.
Yeah,
and
but when you
finished
get
in the
that
morning.
close to the end of a game you've enjoyed so much, you can't, how do you put it down?
Exactly. Right? I was like, oh, like it would just, one more little beat and I'll be done. But then it kept kind of throwing like, here's one more twist, here's one more thing to have to stop and do before you finish. So that was maybe, I think, all of those individual parts where you sort of think it's going to be done and then it's not done were all of really good quality, but I think maybe it suffered slightly from having too many big like reveals or big, you're done, just kidding, got you. Like I think maybe
faked out one too many times.
Maybe faked out maybe one too many times, and there isn't one in particular I would point at and say that's the one they should have gotten rid of, but maybe it sort of just lessened the impact of them by doing it so many times.
No, it's a fair criticism. I mean, especially when you're playing it that late at night and you're kind of like, want it to end, but you're like, oh, I kind of need to go to bed,
Yeah, that was my problem too, because the first couple hours started out with like, turn the music up, this is great, I'm so into it. And then the last couple hours were like, oh, this is still amazing, but like, my God, I'm going to be tired tomorrow.
Right. I'm going to regret this tomorrow.
So that was sort of a user error. But for the most part, like, I've never played a game so story heavy, finished it, and then thought to myself, should I New Game Plus this?
Yeah, right. Because it's not like it's going to be very different the second time through. But
exactly. So I'm not going to, because I have so many other things I want to play.
Yeah.
But I am going through and YouTubing all of like the confidants I didn't max out and all the little like...
Yeah, the different personas you didn't see. And
the personas I didn't see, and like... the other endings I didn't get. I got the good ending, by the way, obviously.
The Phantom Thieves succeed.
Of course. We stole some hearts and it was great.
I'm glad you finally got through it. That's for sure.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed Final Fantasy as much as I enjoyed Persona.
I did. Just to wrap up the Persona thing, I know we talk about Persona a lot on this show. It's a complete coincidence to be the first few episodes we've both been playing some Persona stuff, but I think we'll likely do some kind of Persona 5 spoiler cast in the future. Maybe once I'm through the Royal or whatnot, but that's way in the future. So if you're not a Persona fan, don't worry. This is kind of the end of the road for Persona for a while, okay?
But if you're not a Persona fan, maybe
if you're not a Persona fan,
need to rethink that in your life.
Yeah.
And,
I agree completely.
Play some Persona.
You know it's on sale on the eShop right now in the US for $7.99 on PS4.
Wow, that's
$10 in Canada. I'm sure it's cheap everywhere else too.
Wow.
So like if you have any interest in playing that game, like just buy it.
Wow,
yourself,
buying
okay?
that game for $7 is almost like you're a real thief in real life. That is such
Stealing
a good
the heart
deal.
of the PS4. Oh dear. Okay, well, I've been playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, finally finished that. But before I talk about it, I just want to go quickly over a couple smaller things I've played. After I beat such a long game, I like to go through and just, knock out like a couple 2-hour little experiences, right? And so one of the things that's been in my backlog just forever is Inside. I loved Limbo back when it came out. I don't even remember what year Limbo was, but it was like pretty old now, right? And Inside isn't even that new. I think it's 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. But I went through that game. Like I really enjoyed. I love the art style of these games, man. Like the really dark and they're sinister, but they're somehow
hopeful at the same time, right?
Yeah, right.
There's a weird beauty to them.
You've played both, right? Have you?
I've only played Limbo.
Okay.
But
very
Inside's
similar.
been on my list, like you said, for a long time.
Well, they're both the same. I think Playdead Studio, both of them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but either way, like I just love I think they have a proprietary engine actually it's a side scroller, but it's not quite 100% sideways. Like it's a little bit into the distance as well, like just off the plane. And I just love the angle at which your character climbs like boxes and platforms and whatnot, because it's a little bit askew and it just looks so cool. And I think that it does such a cool job of like you're very much running in the foreground, but things can still happen in the background that interact with you. Like you'll be running through at the start of the game, you're going through a forest and you're just heading from left to right and you don't know anything about what's happening, but it becomes clear very early on within like the first minute that you're being chased and these people are trying to get you. And you can see them like driving their cars in the distance, and then they'll take a turn in the road and they'll start heading towards like the foreground of the screen, and they're coming at you, but you're heading from left to right. But somehow like the background still influences what you're doing in the foreground with instances like that. And I just think it's like a really cool perspective to have the game like presented in.
Yeah, that's a really unique and creative kind of way to interact with the game.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of games that kind of do it, but I think these games are a great example of, that kind of thing. The puzzles are cool. They're not overly hard. It wasn't a very challenging game, but it's more like the atmosphere, right? And there's a really weird twist ending for anyone that's played Limbo. Inside. Sorry, I think Limbo had a pretty weird ending too, but Inside definitely is like I kind of had this grimace on my face as I was finishing the game, like Jesus, this is like really off-putting. But it was like a cool game to play, right?
Right. Okay.
So
Something memorable that sticks.
It
with
was,
you?
yeah. I can see why it was so revered when it came out, and I think people really love. It's like a not a cult hit, but it's like people in the industry like really like Limbo. I keep saying Limbo. I mean Inside. They really like this game, and I can totally see why. Like it's off-putting, but I would say it's good. It's really good. The other one I've been playing was Thomas Was Alone. I've actually picked it up on this. They have like an indie bundle on the PS4 right now, or the PlayStation Store, and it was like only a few dollars for Limbo and a couple other games. So I'm saying Limbo. Jesus, I'm just lost today, man.
It's okay. Maybe one day we'll actually talk about Limbo.
Maybe. Thomas Was Alone. So I picked it up. It's a really unique game. Like it's literally like a very simple platformer where you just play as shapes and you have to get them to whatever the goal of the level is. Kind of like a Meat Boy, or like not difficult like that, but like the same kind of very short levels, like you just solve it and go on to the next one. But the whole crux of the game is like these colored shapes that are just, you could make it in Microsoft Paint. They're given these personalities and these names. Like, oh, this one girl, she's very tall and she's very embarrassed about it, but she's helping her friends, and they like personalize these basic shapes in a way that's like very
right
strange.
Because it's centered on the narrator who's sort of like talking about these shapes as you're playing, right?
Yeah, and providing some kind of storyline to something that really has no story. Like it'd be like trying to apply a story to Tetris as you're playing it, but somehow it works, and it's quite it makes it more interesting. Like, I don't think I'd be playing the game if the narrator wasn't providing these little tidbits for me as I was going.
Right. Yeah, I remember when that game came out, and it's one of those examples of a game I've owned for like 5 years and not played. But that's exactly what kind of what drew me to it, was the idea that like you start to resonate with these.
You're like, oh, I really like Thomas.
Right?
Well, there's a shape named James too, and I'm like, man, like this is my guy right here. I don't actually like
and
him. And
what's wrong with James?
Well, the problem with James is that he's inverted gravity.
Oh no!
So like
James.
he's just like Thomas, but he's backwards, and like I guess that says something about me. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. Either way, I'm not quite finished. I don't know if I'll like finish it, but I just enjoyed playing. I thought I'd mention it here. But yes, Final Fantasy VII Remake. For those of you that follow me on Twitter personally, I've been doing a top 50 games of all time list, going from 50 to 1, and ranking the games that like, are my personal top 50 based on whatever factors. If you want to see it, go follow me on Twitter. You can find the link. I'm at Jackpot at JAKKP0T. But this game, even though I just finished it, I ranked it at 34, which is like, it's kind of, I don't know if it's like, recency bias. You tend to maybe have a different opinion on things if you're more fresh off of them. But I honestly don't think my opinion is going to change. Like, this game is really, really good, and it's not perfect by any sense, but I think like the story just really grabbed me. And I don't know if it's because maybe it's quite pertinent for the world kind of today. Like the theme is very much like environmentalism and having a problem with like some giant corporation that's ruining the environment and doesn't care about the people. They just want to make profit, and like propaganda, and how Shinra is making a lot of people perceive them as like they're only helping and nothing bad's happening. But then you find out like, oh, they're experimenting. And I'm not saying companies are like doing that in real life, but it's kind of the nefarious, like, big box CEO thing compared to like the general population type of deal. And I think that it did a really good job of almost being a political commentary while also being this like classic RPG. And it's pretty cool in that way.
That's a neat juxtaposition, especially because like that would probably obviously been present in the original game too, but then it's still so like relevant.
Well, that's
maybe even more relevant
what blew me away
now.
about it too, because you're thinking like, yeah, this, obviously they've made some changes and went more in depth in certain aspects of the story because it's the remake and it's only the first portion of the game, so they were able to flesh it out a lot more. But just, I mean, the bones of the story are still the same, and the fact that this was the story back when the original came out, I think is like very forward thinking almost, and I really enjoyed the story of the game. What I will say about it is that I have such a love-hate relationship with the battle system in this game. I really like it on principle. I think it's really, really cool the way that it's like, I spoke about it last time. I won't go super in depth, how it's kind of like, it slows down, but it's also very action focused. But my problem with it is I found that towards the end of the game, a lot of the enemies just become like big damage sponges. And it's not that I'm not playing correctly, or not that I'm not using like the optimal spells, or playing a good, like the way I think is going to be the easiest way to beat this boss, but it's just I feel like the fights go on for a long time. And so I actually will say that I did something I don't usually do, which is I turned the game down to easy for the final 4 chapters. I was growing a little bit tired of these long extended boss fights, of which I lost a couple and I had to restart them a few times, and I'm just or like a random side quest would happen and I found the battle just got really like unnecessarily time consuming, just because I would spend so long fighting these enemies with so much health. So yeah, I dropped it down, and it was really easy, probably like way easier than I would have liked it, but I was just so invested in the story and the characters and like knowing where the game was going that I didn't feel the need to like continue brute forcing through it on medium. I knew I could do it. It was like a time saving thing, right? It was just, I wanted to get to the end so bad.
Right. That wasn't the part that was keeping you motivated to
yeah.
play. It was the story and finishing and getting through that. And versus like, yeah, that's a problem I think a lot of games have. And like, I think you see it a lot of things, almost like RPGs can be bad and like shooters can be bad for it, where like the difficulty is just like, oh, you have to hit it 15 more times.
Yeah,
but,
it needs like 5 headshots to die.
It doesn't make you have to consider different options or like different play styles, or like kind of like feel like you're doing anything to outsmart the situation of the game, or like it just is like, okay, it'll take me an extra 5 minutes to beat this because I have to use the skill 5 more times, and like
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm just waiting for my ATB gauge to build enough times where I can use 10 more spells, then it'll be dead. Like, I didn't particularly feel bad about it, and I don't think anyone should ever feel bad about changing a difficulty. Like, it's how you're doing it to have fun. Like, if you're whatever is going to give you the best experience for you, you should do it. That being said, I don't remember the last time I've actually turned something down, but for this, I felt it was quite appropriate. But anyway, aside from the battle system, I think they did I don't know the reference point to how this was in the original, but the NPCs seem really realistic in this game in terms of like what they have to say. What they have to say gets very repetitive when you run past the same person in the street and they're like, gee, Tifa, you can come over anytime. Like, and the same guy says that every time you run past. But like some of the comments, if you take away the repetitiveness, are very much like insightful and kind of things you would expect to hear like on the street in real life if this was the situation, you know? And I really appreciated that. I also really liked the way the banter between your party members evolves throughout the game. Like Cloud is a very stoic character. He shows almost no emotion, and like at the start of the game, he's in it. He's like, yeah, I'll help you guys out, but like I'm in it for the paycheck, you know. And very much like and the other characters have their extreme personalities too, at least some of them. And by the end of the game, it's like the animosity is almost not there, and Cloud and Barrett are kind of like, oh, I got you, buddy. Like I'll watch your back, and they kind of develop this relationship that seems like it happened so gradually that I didn't even notice it wasn't like one chapter Cloud didn't care, and then the next chapter he was like, oh, Barrett, I'll help you, like good fight. You know, It just happened, and then partway through the game, I was kind of just like, man, these guys really are becoming friends, you know? And it wasn't through cutscenes or anything, which is how a lot of games do it. It was more through like little comments they'd make to each other during a battle and stuff of that nature, or like while they're running through a dungeon.
So they kind of like grew alongside the story.
Exactly,
as
yeah.
you played.
I found that really, really cool. The game has a couple fourth wall breaking moments towards the end, or at least I thought so, which they were like cheesy laughter. There's one section where as you're getting towards the end of the game, and it's not really a spoiler at all, but Cloud does this thing, or actually it's not even Cloud, I think it was Tifa, I can't remember now, but they like fight an enemy, and then she does this cool pose and like looks at the camera in like this total anime style, and she's like, I hope everybody's warmed up or something like that. And it's obviously like, oh, I hope you're warmed up for like the next section of the next remake game and the next remake game, you know?
Right.
Like I hope you're warmed up because you played this first section, but like it seems so clear to me that's what they were going for. And there was a couple instances of stuff like that.
Cute,
but
yeah.
It was. There's just, and this game is like so style, like, you know, those anime styles where you'll have all the characters are like there and they're doing their cool poses, or like they'll finish a battle and they'll all like pose together. Like this game knows it's stylish, it knows it has good graphics, and it just does it. Like at the end of the game especially, there's 2 or 3 scenes where you could like turn the image of their pose into like a boy band or like a cool poster. Like they're just posed in such a perfect way. It's so cheesy, but I loved it.
It is a great Final Fantasy thing. Like I remember the most recent one that came out where that was Noxus and his group, like all of the memes online jokes were like, oh, this Noxus and his boy band as they travel along.
Right. Like, I mean that game was it was different too, but this game, like, just so stylish, right? I loved it up front to back. I think it was, aside from the few difficulty spikes and like, you know, my gripes with the battling, I think everything else is quite good. I mean, very good, honestly. It's a great game, and I think I will actually be going back to it eventually, which is another reason why I didn't feel so bad about turning down the difficulty, because if you go for any of the trophies, there's to beat each chapter on hard is some of the requirements of like getting some of the trophies. So if I go back and beat them on hard, like who cares if my first run of, you know, the last few chapters was easy to start.
I mean, if that makes you feel better about yourself.
Like, I don't know. I think when it comes to difficulty, you and I have some different. No.
I'm just playing around. I think it depends on the game, right?
Yeah.
Like some games, part of the gameplay is the challenge, right? But then some games too, like, you're focused on the story, or there's so many other aspects to it. Like, it's difficulty doesn't always matter in a game, and this seems like the kind of game where like there's a lot of other factors going on. I'm just giving you a hard time.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Just
mostly.
You know what? I gave you a pretty hard time about not playing The Last of Us and all that yet.
God.
So I feel like maybe it's my time to get my dues there.
Yeah,
but I just want to be honest, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and lie to all you, all the fans out there.
I was trying to think. There's definitely a game I've done that before too, where I bumped it down to easy just for the end, just to push through. But I don't know. I can't remember what game it was. I'll try to think about it.
Whatever the case, that was my experience. But anyway, this great game. Like, it's one of my favorites of all time already, and I could only see it like staying there for sure. So we're gonna take a quick break and then join us again after a lovely musical interlude, and we'll talk about the 2 giant state of plays that we've had from PlayStation. All right, everybody, welcome back. We're here for the second part of the show, and of course, that means we're here to talk about the news, which is pretty cool news day, actually, talking about these two big presentations for two of the biggest games of the year, I think. So now, as we will all remember, back on May 14th, there was the State of Play reveal for the Ghost of Tsushima gameplay trailer, and we both watched that, of course, again, the day after we recorded the podcast. So we'll give our very late kind of impressions now. But Kate, what did you think overall of the game?
My initial impression of the trailer, and especially because they started out talking about sort of like the world and exploration, was just how I'm so inspired by how beautiful this game is. Like, we've had a lot of really nice looking games recently, and like,
I mean, the end of the console generation, right? This
like,
is when everyone puts out those banger.
These are the peak like visual styles, and like we've been playing beautiful games, and like we're gonna talk about The Last of Us soon, which is also gorgeous. But this game in particular stands out to me as just being like such a beautiful, interesting looking world. Like, it's very realistic, but then the colors are so vibrant.
That's the one thing I noticed so much when I was watching too, is just like the color palette they've went with in this game is like so appealing. Yeah,
like it's exaggerated, but it still feels like it's got a realistic look to it. Mm-hmm. So that stood out to me a lot. The one thing too, at the very beginning, they quote like their philosophy for it when they're talking about they want you to have a great sense of exploration in the game, and they said you can't have exploration without curiosity. Mm-hmm. And that struck me. I don't know, maybe I was feeling a little contemplative when I watched it, but that really like resonated and struck me. And I thought, like, with that sort of philosophy, like, it immediately doubled how interested I was in the game. Yeah. Because like, I think that's such a simple but like fantastic way to think about it, right? Is like, you can put all of this stuff in your game and you can populate it with so many things, but if the player doesn't feel like they have like a natural reason to want to go explore and do those things, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, like, you can't just have it barren. So like, you have to strike that balance between like there's content but you want your players to have a reason outside of you just telling them go here.
Right, or outside of seeing an icon on the map, like, oh, I got to check this off because I feel like I need to complete everything.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they've got an absolutely wonderful sort of like baseline for that, and I think they've done a really neat job with the UI as well. Like, first of all, like, the actual UI that pops up on your screen telling you you've reached a certain location looks gorgeous. I really like the style they've put, but then I also really like they mentioned just some small subtle directions for you. Like, you'll find a bird sometimes as you're riding through a field, and if you follow the bird, it will lead you to a point of interest, or like a fox will lead you somewhere. So like, there are these really interesting visual cues.
Yeah, or they mentioned smoke signals in the distance as well. Yeah. You'll see someone's got a fire lit, and you can think like, oh man, there's a guy over there at a camp or something. Like, I'm gonna go check it out.
And that's exciting to me because like, exploration's a big thing I care about in games. Like, in dungeon-like style games, I'll explore every single last inch because I don't want to miss something. But then I also like big exploration games where, you want to seek it out. You want to touch
every inch of the map, right?
Yeah, like, to basically, as they explain, like, I want to explore my curiosity in it. And it's nice to know that like, this will probably reward me because they've done that intentionally. And I think that's really neat. Like, a lot of games do something similar, but I don't know, the animal aspect of it seemed to me like a really like kind of natural but different way of doing that.
I mean, I totally agree. My only worry for it would be like how many hours, like, this is a big game, right? Like, how many hours are you going to play of this? How many times is that bird going to swoop down and lead you somewhere? I just, it looks really cool in the presentation, and I'm with you. Like, I think it's a new way to guide the player where the game wants you to go, right? Because it's way better than just seeing like, an icon appear in the distance, or like checking your map in a big, Watch Dogs, or, one of those big Ubisoft like open world games, kind of where you go through the map and you're checking off the little icons. So it's better, I think, in that way, because it is more organic, but I just wonder if it'll get repetitive.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think it definitely will come down to implementation, how often it happens, how satisfying it is to follow those things versus continuing on your objective. How important the
side quests end up being too.
Like, I know, like, what it made me think of is, and just you talking about the potential of it not really being as satisfying as it should be. As I was thinking about Red Dead Redemption 2, and there's a lot of like organic things that you run into that are non-scripted sequences. That's like, oh, you know, like somebody's lost, you can take them home, or like somebody's getting robbed and you can stop on your way to help them. And like these aren't things that show up on your map. They just sort of like are integrated into the game and
just
happen.
Happens as if you were actually simming, like if actually you were in that world.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like you just happen to come by at the time when someone's in some sort of peril. And for the first maybe 10 hours of the game, I stopped and did every single one of them because they were interesting and like it was a fun, flavorful thing. And I'm trying to roleplay Arthur Morgan. I think like, yeah, realistically he would stop. But then after that first 10, 15 hours or so, I have not stopped for a single one because they became repetitive and like ultimately didn't really lead to any fun or interesting gameplay.
Well, that too. And also you might, like if the rewards aren't what you're looking for, right? Yeah.
So I think that's an example of like, it was a good idea, but didn't really like get implemented as well as it could have. So yeah, you're right. Hopefully this is a
it
little
just depends,
better,
right? You know, like it'd be nice if it didn't happen all the time, but then once in a while there was one. If they were more of, you know, a little bit less dense, but a little bit more thoughtful with what these side quests are and where the game is trying to lead you, then I think that would be a recipe for success.
Yeah, exactly. Because it would be exciting. Like say you haven't seen a bird or a fox in like maybe 8 hours of gameplay or so, and you see one like, oh my god, like, I have to follow that. It would be like a
and I wonder
surprise.
too, like there must be a lot of stuff. Like this game looks huge, right? Like like what I'm hoping that there's other things you can find that actually the game's not leading you to as well. Like even more secret, like, you know, things that you could come across even if it wasn't directing you there at all, just for a reward for being thorough. Yeah.
And I think that's the case, like it's, especially like being that was the first thing they detailed in this state of play, is like the world and the exploration. I think that was sort of like one of the building blocks that they created that they knew they wanted to have a heavy emphasis on for the game. So, or at least that's what stood out to me the most. So
yeah, right.
My expectations going into the game, and hopefully I'm correct in assuming so, is that there will be a good emphasis on the world and you kind of participating in it.
I get the impression that there is, right? What did you think of the combat? I think the combat looks really fun.
It was really neat. I sort of like how you have the almost like Dishonored kind of like two styles to play. You have the sneaky stealth ghost kills, and then you have the like, don't be an asshole, be an honorable samurai and like walk up and challenge everyone to duels.
Right.
So that's kind of neat, and like hopefully
it's a cool combination.
Yeah, I hope that you can actually do a bit of both, and it doesn't sort of like lock you into, are you a good guy or a bad guy? Like,
yeah, I didn't get the impression it was good or bad though. I think it just came down to like, what kind of samurai do you want to be?
Right.
You know, like I think you're going through the same story. I think it depends like just your play style.
Right. Know? But I guess what I mean is like, I hope that like you can do like a decent amount of both. Like in some games, like an Infamous kind of thing where it's like, oh, you pick this one style and you get like cool, you work your way up that skill tree. So then you don't want to do the other side. So you kind of get stuck playing one way or the other. Whereas like in this game, they both kind of look interesting to try to do simultaneously. Like maybe depending on the situation, you'd pick one or the other instead of like,
oh, totally. I think I personally think you'd want to mix both styles depending on the situation. But then I'm sure there's other people too that would just be like, no, I'm playing stealth and I'm going to max out the stealth tree and not even worry about the combat. Yeah. But I think that customization is really key. And I didn't get the impression that you were kind of locked to one style. I think that would be a mistake, honestly, because every game kind of this vein these days is not locked to like one class. They're very much like, play this how you want, make your character your own. You know, and it's kind of like intrinsic storytelling towards like your experience.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and it's funny, I will maybe touch on this a little bit in the future, but definitely there's a very big emphasis on like player agency and freedom. So I think you're correct in saying that. But yeah, the actual combat to me looks decent and very serviceable. It's very cinematic and it's fun to watch.
That black and white mode. Wow, that looks nice.
That is beautiful. Yeah. It's the samurai cinema mode, which I love the phrasing of.
They were like every good samurai movie is in like these black and white iconic scenes or whatever. So we want to recreate it. They made like a pretty big deal of it, and it was almost like on the nose a little bit, but it was cool.
Yeah, I almost like kind of cracked a smile, and it was kind of goofy, and like basically it's a black and white mode they've put in. You play the game in black and white to sort of emulate
is
like
it the whole game,
like,
or is it just certain combats?
I think it's the whole game, and you can toggle it on or off. So like you could just put it on for a certain fight, or like I guess play the whole game that way. But like in the end, they did like the cinematic. They have like the hand on the sword, like slightly unsheathing it, and it was a little bit goofy, but it looks good. The combat reminded me a lot of like an Assassin's Creed kind of sort of style. It looks like they've sort of modernized it a little bit more and maybe put their own spin on it, but it really did remind me of that Arkham, like Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed kind of thing, where like sort of auto targets the next one for you, and like
the counters, just the button,
counter,
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, as someone that's really into Dark Souls combat, I don't know, like, is that something you prefer? Like, where are you at?
I think it really depends on the game. Like, as a general rule of thumb, I sort of maybe lean towards the more like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, like Sekiro kind of combat, because that is like, that combat itself is a vehicle for the game and one of the actual like points of interest that make me immerse and want to play it. Whereas the combat in Ghost of Tsushima looks like something that is sort of like to service the rest of the game. So like for me, this game is interesting me because of the world, and it looks like a good story, and I want to like explore, and those are the things that stand out to me as like my main motivations for keeping an eye on this. And then the combat seems like something fun to facilitate the other aspects of the game. Whereas something like Dark Souls is like it coincidentally like also has all those other amazing things, but the gameplay itself is like a main focus. And I don't think one is better than the other. It's just different avenues of
just
preferences and like just different aspects, things you want to enjoy, right? Like some games they have puzzles instead of combat. Like neither one is inherently better. It just depends on what that game sets out to do and how well they are able to execute that. So
no, I'm with you. I think that's so true. But I think like I really enjoyed Spider-Man, and I like those kind of combat systems that they're done well. Like I know some of them, it just depends on how fun it is to watch in a way, you know? Like they're never really that demanding. Like I remember I played Shadow of Mordor back on when that came out, and that game was like you could just counter everyone so easily and just kill everyone. Like it was almost mindless. So as long as it's not like that, I think I'm gonna
like the original Assassin's Creed, your best strategy was literally just to wait and parry and
That's right. I think we've come past that. So I
think so. I think the only issue that kind of combat runs into sometimes is it gets a little bit repetitive.
Well, because your strategy is to be passive. If the counter is so powerful, right? I didn't get that impression from watching this though. This very much seemed like you were the aggressor, or you have a lot of agency in terms of stealth options.
And like you said, it seems like you have so many different tools of ways to approach the fight as well. Like I don't think that will maybe be like the thing that stands out to you as the reason to play the game, but I think it definitely won't. It doesn't look like it's going to hold it back. And overall, I'm definitely interested in this game. If I don't see anything else, I think it's still a purchase for me. So.
Well, there you go. Let's move along, Kate, shall we? Today, if we're moving back from May 14th all the way to today, May 27th, just a couple short hours ago, we saw a extended look at The Last of Us Part 2. Of course, we'd seen a bit on it before, but this is kind of the last big push before the game's released later next month. And, I mean, personally, as I know you haven't played the first one, but for me, like I didn't need to see this to make me more excited or sell me on this game. Like I was getting it anyway, and I think that this is just icing on the cake for those that want to see more and just need to like whet their appetite, you know, for what it's going to be. And personally, like I think this game looks like it's sticking really true to the roots of the gameplay of the first game, but just expanding and refining and adding a little bit more there for those that want to play a little bit differently or have a bit more. I mean, we were just talking about player agency for Ghost of Tsushima, and very much in this game, it seems like you've got a few more options this time as far as how you want to go through each scenario in combat and whatever. So I would say that looks really, really promising. Yeah,
and I agree for the most part. I might social suicide myself a little bit here. So yeah,
this is a friendly community.
Get ready with that hate mail.
No, don't.
But I will preface this by saying I think the game looks fantastic. I don't think I've seen a single thing.
We need to stop right there. This is so beautiful, and we've said that about a lot of games I think recently on the show, like even Ghost of Tsushima. But like this game, like the realism and the textures on everything is just mind-blowing.
The characters' faces is what strikes me the most in this. Like, it actually reminded me a lot because they played at the very beginning before they got into any gameplay or some new footage. It was some bits of trailers that we've seen in the past, and there's that like somber and like voiceover with like a few like regretful, sorrowful lines or whatever they say, and it reminded me a little bit of like Red Dead 2 trailers that had come out. And with the same, like, kind of similar, like, landscapes and environments. And
it's like people talking over B-roll footage of the landscape, or Ellie, like, walking across on her horse.
And, like, they did some, like, close-ups of the characters' faces, and, like, the emotion that they were able to portray in that was, like, it's very, very impressive. Like, whatever they've done with the, like, facial animations in that game.
Oh, it's unbelievable how this look. And, you know, like, that, I don't think the presentation today, obviously it's being streamed, so it's not going to be the best quality. Like, imagine getting this on PS5 later this year. Like, what's that going to look like, you know?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really special. But yeah, my one concern, and I will preface this by saying, like, the context is I haven't played the first game yet, so my expectations of what this game will be, as well as what I'm expecting from the first game, might just be wrong, right? Like, I'm trying my best to know as little as possible going into it because I want to experience it fresh, right? So I think everything they showed looks good, but I have a slight concern, which ironically we're just talking about this, about like the freedom of gameplay aspect juxtaposed with the story focused nature of the game. So like, and it's mostly it's a good thing, but there is that massive emphasis right now in the gaming community to craft games that allow the player to experience at their own freedom, meaning you have like a multitude of ways to navigate the world and engage in conflict and like choose your own play style. So oftentimes, and when it's done well, that gives you a really good player agency. It's rewarding and it's immersive, and you're like building the story as you play. But the downside to that style of game sometimes is it can come at the cost of the narrative, I think, at times, especially when there's a character they have boundaries and they're limited because they're that specific character, right? Like, maybe a character wouldn't use a certain type of weapon, or they wouldn't approach a situation a way that you want to as the player because like they are someone specific and they have like their own morals and like, you know, their own way of dealing with things. So I think I expected the first game, and I could be wrong, to maybe be a little bit more linear because you're experiencing their story, you're not creating their story.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think this open world, like play your own way, can kind of like make it difficult for the developers to make you experience scenes in a certain way and like kind of like have you navigate the story as it's intended. So that's my only concern is like, I kind of compared it to like the original BioShock, which is a linear game, very story focused, but like you still get that sense of exploration and like you're engaging in the world, but like when you go through it, you go through these set pieces in the correct order because that's what drives the story forward. Yeah,
and I mean, just to maybe set your expectations, like that's very much what The Last of Us is as well. Like it is not an open world game. Like the open part you saw in the trailer today is very much, I think, like they give you more open arenas as far as combat. Like it'll be just a bigger space where you're fighting these enemies, whereas the game still progresses you across a linear story. So it's just that they're giving you more, at least in the example we saw today, like they're giving you more ways to tackle the combat scenarios, or at least that's what I got out of it. Well, right. And like, yeah, if they get that right in terms of like the story doesn't kind of like get put on the back seat, then I think that's fantastic because you just get more fun gameplay options as a player, and you still get to experience the amazing story. And I think like you'd said earlier in our pre-show, in our pre-show conversation, that like you think they're intentionally showing more gameplay than story because obviously totally, right? I mean, I think they're very aware of the story spoilers that are out there, and also I don't think anyone that hasn't been spoiled is going to want to watch this and learn like, you know, a major story point. Like that's why you want to play the game. Exactly.
Right? Like that's, you want to be surprised as you're playing, and you want to have those stakes set really high where you don't know like what's going to happen and nobody's safe. And I think
totally. And The Last of Us like really left at a point where you wanted to know more back then, and now we're so close to getting a chance to going through this story and seeing the next chapter, right?
Exactly. So I think like the game is probably very safe, and I expect it to be fantastic. Just going based like on this one trailer from today, it kind of gave an impression of like the story sort of taking a little bit of a backseat, which I agree. Like, I don't think that's actually going to happen, and I think it's probably safe. But it did raise that tiny,
it's a fair
little
criticism.
bit of
I mean,
concern.
it's hard to know without having touched the game yet, right? We'll only know when we play it. I think the only other thing I wanted to point out that was we have maybe not said yet was that the little bits they've added to the combat, I think, are going to be very. It'll give you a lot more options. Like that scene where she was kind of Ellie was crawling through the grass with her bow, and like she was laying like on her side, like prone stealth, hiding and like shooting people from the grass. Like that is so cool to me. And the way that you can now, like, they'll be the infected along with the enemy humans at the same time, so you can kind of pit them against each other and use them as almost like environmental help for yourself. I think that's something that wasn't really explored as much in the first game. And also in the first game too, one of my only complaints with it was that there wasn't always a lot of enemy variety. Like it was either the same couple varieties of infected guys for the most part, or like bounty hunter kind of, or rebel groups of people that were all just dudes with machine guns. Like it wasn't necessarily like extremely varied in terms of like the enemies you're presented with. And this game, I think they showed like a few different varieties of the infected, and then also there's those two human groups that they'd outlined too. That what were they? They were both like religious cults or like some kind of extremist group that developed out of this whole pandemic that had happened in the world. So I think one of them seemed to be very much like stealth focused, and the other one maybe is a bit more like, let's get out our AK-47s and try and shoot everyone to death maybe. So I think there'll be some more varied enemy styles, which I think will be a nice breath of fresh air maybe, because also I get the impression this is going to be a longer game than the first one also.
Yeah, I think so. Like it did seem like they were kind of expanding it and sort of taking what they did with the first one and like, it's just a bigger
version, right? And I think that's the best part, is that they don't seem to have gotten rid of anything from the first one. They're just adding. Yeah. And I think that's a great thing, as long as they don't add, there's always potential they'll add a mechanic that doesn't work as well, or like maybe cheapens the experience. Like that, when she swings on the rope, the rope swinging is very much like, that's definitely out of Uncharted 4. Like you can tell.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, the rope swinging in Uncharted 4 was some of the worst part of that game, in my opinion. So like, I really hope that
it felt a little clunky.
They've like learned their lesson on that one, and maybe it's like, you'd hate to have like one mechanic that doesn't feel as good, because everything else in this game, at least based on the first one, like it's so polished. And so like I have faith in them, right? This is like
exactly
one of the premier franchises in gaming at this point. So like, and especially Naughty Dog, like they don't miss very often, right? Or at all recently. So I mean, I couldn't really be more excited, to be honest. I can't wait to get this.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm definitely encouraged to go play the first one after watching this
it's not that long. You can get through it. But
I definitely will. I got to say one more thing I have to point out, and this is just how incredibly gruesome the violence is. Like,
I was going to say the
I'm
same
shocked
thing,
like
man.
There weren't some like warnings at the beginning of the trailer or something, because like it was very, very visceral and gruesome. Like some of the throat stab at one point, and like the side stabs, like it is not trying to be cinematic in the slightest. It is just like pure cutthroat, cutthroat.
It's violent, like
it's violent.
Cutthroat. It is though, and she throws a Molotov and like hits that dog.
Oh
and
my
you can
God,
hear the dog whimper, and
that was
like,
horrible.
Holy shit, man! And the funny thing about, like, not funny, but I think a lot of games have violence that's similar to this, right? Like even we'll talk about Ghost of Tsushima again. Like you're going to be cutting several people's throats in that game, but the way that the bodies fall and like the reactions that people have to getting attacked like this in The Last of Us, like you almost could believe yourself that the motion capture people like actually got stabbed to have like a realistic reaction to this,
Yeah.
Like it's so. I would imagine, like, I've never seen someone get stabbed in the neck, but like, and let's pray that I never do. But like, if I was to witness that, I feel like it would happen exactly like how this person reacted in The Last of Us.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of games, like they go like a little bit over the top, or like it's sort of like cartoony,
it's not as
or
grounded,
like
right?
like, or there'll be like a blood splatter, or like something will kind of like, it doesn't give you that sense of like, oh my God, did I just watch someone get stabbed?
Yeah,
and
it
like,
was actually.
It was interesting juxtaposed with like, she shot so many people in the head with her gun and you feel nothing. But that stab,
I felt something.
Well, excitement for the game.
Meshed with like, oh God.
Right? But like, I don't know, it didn't strike me as something being like, you were so desensitized to it, I guess.
Yeah, we are. We really
are. But like, the stabs, like it felt so like personal and intimate when like watching those, and like it made me like I don't know how many times I see someone die in games, and like you think nothing of it,
for
right?
video games, we've witnessed thousands of deaths.
Thousands of deaths, but like
these
I
ones
don't know.
hit different.
They did.
Really
There was some kind of like quantifiable quality of it that like.
I think it just comes across as, I don't want to say the most grounded, but like it's very grounded, and like if this was to be a real life scenario, this is how it would go down if she did this. Like, you know, it's a little bit less escapism and a little bit more realism within the world of a fantasy, and like a fictional setting.
And it was so like, this is just business too. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't any like drawn out like cinematic fight, or like it was just like, you have to die because I want to survive. So goodbye.
Yeah.
And it was just like cold.
It was something else. Oh man. Yeah. I can't wait to do it though.
Yeah. I can't wait to stab those innocent people.
Damn right. I don't know how innocent they are. We'll have to see
know.
the storyline.
She just wanted to play her PSP. That's all she wanted.
Dude, that was a Vita. Okay, get it right.
Or a Vita.
That was a Vita.
That's right.
I think it was
Vita.
actually, I think I saw some comments online or something
saying
that
like what
it was
game
actually
it was.
Hotline Miami that was playing on there.
I think
something.
Hotline Miami 2 is what I saw.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love that that's included.
A cute little
What a
Easter
cool
egg,
shout out, yeah. Anyway, that is the news for this week. So join us right after the break where we will get into a quiz. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. We're here for the third segment of today's show, and that means today I get to exact my revenge by seeing if Kate can do well enough to pass this quiz I've designed for today.
Okay, all right, I'm ready. I've been stretching, I've limbered up.
Good,
Let's
good,
go.
Good. Okay, so it's actually really fitting you're wearing your Anne Orlando t-shirt today.
I am.
Because you're a big Dark Souls fan. The Souls series that we mentioned actually earlier in the show that came up. So you might say you enjoy fighting some tough bosses.
I do like a challenge.
Okay, well, hopefully this is a challenge for you. The quiz today, I've got 10 names prepared.
Okay.
And these names are either going to be a well-known difficult video game boss. Well, I shouldn't say well-known. They're difficult video game bosses that show up on like, you know, this is the top, whatever, toughest boss of all time.
Right.
A boss of that nature. Or it could also be a K-pop idol.
Oh my God. No. Okay, so it's a 50-50 at the very least.
It's very easy. You just gotta, I'm gonna read you 10 names.
Okay.
And you're gonna tell me if it's a video game boss or a K-pop idol.
Okay, I am absolutely in love with this quiz already. Everyone, please play along at home and see how you do.
Okay, well, are you ready to get started?
I am ready to get started.
Okay, and I will tell you that there's no way that I've ordered these. It's not like alternating. It could be. It's also not like 50-50, or it might be 50-50. Like you, there's no
I'm getting
rhyme or
no
reason.
hints.
I've literally just picked these names. Okay.
Okay.
Number 1, Kai Lang.
Oh God! Well, that's all of a sudden it's both. There's gonna be at least one of these.
There is nothing that's both. I honestly looked for one, but do you know how hard it is to find someone that's like both a K-pop idol and also a video game boss? Like, doesn't exist.
Right. Okay. Could you pronounce that one more time for me?
It is Kai Lang. I can spell that for you if you like.
Please do. Yeah, I'd like the the country of origin as well, and if you could use it in a sentence, please.
I mean, Kai Lang is either a tough video game boss or a K-pop star.
That is correct.
And it is spelled Kaileng.
Okay, I'm gonna go with a video game boss because Kai Lang sounds masculine to me, and it's also a singular person. So while I don't recognize it, I think a K-pop group would either be like, I mean, there's probably, okay, maybe I'm just showing my lack of K-pop knowledge, but all the K-pop knowledge that I know, it's either a group or it's like a female artist. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure there are probably tons of male K-pop artists that are like singular, but I don't know of any. So I'm going to say that it's a boss because it's a singular name.
Okay. We'll go over the scores at the end, by the way. I'm keeping track.
Sure.
I love the insight, by the way. Please explain your thought process. That was my favorite thing about doing the other quiz.
Right? Like sometimes you need to like bullshit your way to an answer.
For those that missed it, I think was it episode 2 or 3, you gave me a quiz on
right,
whichever
yeah.
game it
I
came
gave
from.
you some great PlayStation exclusives and with an amazing review. I think it's like the IGN review for games that made it over like the
like a little
best
snippet
rated.
of what they read.
And then like the worst user review I could find on Metacritic, and you had to match them.
It was fun. But anyway, check it out if you're interested. But let's move on to question 2.
Okay.
The next name is Queen Zeal.
Queen Zeal.
Zeal, Zeal, just like
Zeal.
the word.
Okay. Oh, that is really tough. You've gone for some very obscure references.
I mean, I had to make it hard.
Yes.
As hard as I could. I don't know.
Yeah. It's basically going to come down to, do I know this boss? Or
We'll see.
I don't know. I know the League of Legends K-pop band.
Yeah, well.
I'm really good with that one. I played them on Beat Saber. It was great. Queen Zeal. I'm going to go that this is a K-pop artist.
Okay. K-pop artist. We got one boss, one K-pop artist. Number 3, and my personal favorite on the list.
Okay.
Keith Ape.
Keith Ape. Ape, like, as in, like,
just what it is.
gorilla.
Keith Ape.
Keith Ape. Okay, so I can apply my logic from the first answer to this being that it's a male name. But I really have this weird intuition that Keith Ape would be like a K-pop guy, and like maybe he has some sort of like weird jungle theme to him.
Yep.
Monkeys are like kind of common, notable animal bosses in games,
there's a lot
though.
of monkeys,
like
right?
there are quite a few monkeys in games. I really hate that I'm so stuck in the middle on this. I just want to find one that I nail. I'm gonna say Keith Ape is K-pop because I think it's funnier if that's correct.
Okay,
yes.
fair enough. So we had Queen Zeal before. This one, number 4, is Zelo. Zelo.
Oh, this is so dumb. This is so incredible.
This really is stupid, isn't
This
it?
is so hard. This is so incredibly hard.
We just thought we had a couple big games to talk about earlier. We had a couple big PlayStation announcements to talk about in the second segment. So why not do something fun this time, right?
$5 bin did you find these games from?
Hey, some of them are like reputable games. I'll tell you where they're from.
Yeah, I bet. I feel like some of these are going to make me feel really dumb in the end. But I'm going to say Zelo is a K-pop band. I think.
All right.
I think, yeah.
All right. Next up, Goro.
Oh, Goro. Well, okay. Maybe I've just played too much Persona because Goro Akachi is one of the characters' names.
No. I would have said Akechi for that.
Yeah, I know you would have said Akachi, but I think Goro is a video game boss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, Brave Brothers, number 6.
Brave Brothers. That sounds like a boss for sure.
Okay, boss.
It's got that, boss alliteration. I think I could see that popping up in an RPG.
Very certain about that one, I see.
Yeah, you got to be confident. Just fake it till you make it.
Number 7, MC Sniper.
That one sounds weirdly familiar, but I don't. I think that sounds like a JRPG boss.
Okay,
yeah, boss.
Number 8, Pandemonium Warden.
I love that so much. That sounds like it could come straight out of a Persona game. So I think you pulled that from like. You might have even just been playing Persona 4 and like
I will
came
tell you
across
it's
that.
Not from Persona.
Well, I'm still going to say game because that was my original thought before you gave me a clue.
Okay, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
We got 2 more left. Number 9, Jinpachi.
Oh, that sounds that's a game for sure. That sounds very familiar.
Okay. Number 10, and finally, we have Yellow Devil.
That also sounds like it came on Persona. I'd like to point out that none of these are actually from Dark Souls. My shirt did not help in the slightest.
I couldn't pick Dark Souls. I was just inspired.
Yeah, I would have obviously, yeah.
If I picked Dark Souls bosses, you would have got them all right.
Yeah, I think Yellow Devil sounds more like a boss to me, but I've picked not enough K-pop. So we're going to go K-pop on that one.
K-pop, okay. Process of elimination, I see. Okay, are you ready to see how you did?
No, but tell me.
Okay. So number 1, Kai Lang, you said was a video game boss. And it is a video game boss.
Okay.
Kai Lang is a boss from Mass Effect 3.
I
think you fight him a couple times, and the last boss.
Okay, that sounds right. I played some of the first game of Mass Effect, so I never made it to Kai Lang.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2, Queen Zeal, you said is a K-pop singer, is actually a boss in Chrono Trigger.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
tough one on that one.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some.
Number 3, Keith Ape, you said K-pop singer. Keith Ape is in fact a K-pop idol, and I have for all the K-pop idols, I have one fun fact about them for us to learn.
Wonderful.
Keith Ape had some legal trouble for using racist lyrics. I hope he's recovered from such a problem and has amended himself and whatever. But Keith, we don't condone racism on the show, so I hope you've smartened up. Number 4, Zelo. You said K-pop idol, and that Zelo is in fact a K-pop idol.
Yes.
Zelo is a former member of the quote Korean boy group end quote BAP.
Oh, good old BAP,
Good
of
old
course.
BAP, yeah, big
of
BAP
course.
fan.
Big BAP fan.
We bapping all day over here. Goro, you said K-pop.
No, I said
You
game
say boss?
for Goro.
You said boss? Oh,
I
sorry,
did
my
say,
mistake. You said
yeah.
boss. You're in fact correct. Goro
Yes.
is the second to last boss in Mortal Kombat 2.
Yes, that's right. He's
guy
the
with
one with
4
all the
arms,
arms,
that's right.
right?
That's
Yeah,
right, yeah.
I knew he sounded really familiar.
Yeah, I thought you might have got it, but I gotta throw some
Yeah,
easier
he's
ones
the,
there.
he's the forearm, like he's brown, right? And he's
That's right.
got,
Yeah,
like, a
he
beard.
wears like the weird leather straps, I think,
Yeah.
and has like a man ponytail.
Yeah,
thing.
he's got that big man bun.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, he looks good.
That's Goro. So next up we have number 6, Brave Brothers. You said that is a boss from a video game.
Yes.
That is in fact a K-pop idol.
Oh, yes.
And the interesting fact about Brave Brothers is he's actually only one guy.
Oh, he's not two
He's not
people.
2 guys.
He's one guy.
He's one guy.
Why is his name Brave Brothers?
I don't know, but
Maybe us as the audience is like his brother.
like, I like
He's
it. I like
one guy. That's amazing.
it. Number 7, MC Sniper. I thought this is a K-pop idol as well, which is you said a boss. I honestly thought I threw this one in because I thought it sounded like some Metal Gear guy
right? Like
or something.
it sounds like some kind of like
tech.
He'd be like some kind of like warehouse type arena.
That's
and,
exactly
like,
what I thought,
You'd
too.
maybe have to have a stealth element to it or something.
That's right. But MC Sniper, like I said, is in fact a K-pop idol
Okay.
who is known for controversial lyrics about mainstream society.
All right. Well, at least he's not racist.
He's not racist. No, I think he just has some
right. He's just
straight
a
up
little,
shit to say about society. So.
Yeah, maybe some hard truths that we're
maybe
not
so.
ready to hear
Maybe
yet.
so. Number 8, Pandemonium Warden. You said is a video game boss. Completely correct. Honestly, this just came up on the list, and I was like, this is such a ridiculous name that you might just think it's some like K-pop thing, but no, it's a video game boss. It's one of the bosses from Final Fantasy XI, which is the MMO. And this boss, I think, was patched. I was reading about this. I found this really interesting. The boss was apparently patched after it came into the game because it had like 20 phases, and it was like a raid boss or something. It had like 20 phases, and some of them took over an hour to complete.
Wow.
So apparently this was just like the most ridiculously tough thing because it was like a physical endurance to play.
Wow, that's intense. Yeah, it's like almost the length of like going to one of these K-pop artist concerts.
Yeah, right. We got 2 left. Jinpachi, number 9, you said was a boss, and you're in fact correct. That was from Tekken 5, which I think you're familiar with Tekken actually, so that actually might be a pretty bad choice.
You know what? It's something like I've watched a lot of, like, especially Mortal Kombat and Tekken and those sort of like Street Fighter and those fighting games. I've watched a lot of and like follow Evo and like kind of familiar with the competitive scene, just due to having some proximity to it in the past. But I don't really play any of them, so that sounded familiar but I couldn't place it. But good enough that my subconscious knew.
There you go. And finally, the Yellow Devil. You said K-pop band. This is in fact that yellow guy from Mega Man who's in the Smash Bros stage who like the blocks go across.
Oh, that's his name.
He's the Yellow Devil, yeah.
Oh, damn. I feel like this is the one where I feel bad about having
Yeah, he's probably one of the ones you'd recognize the most out of the bosses,
yeah,
but no one ever brings his name up,
I can
right?
picture, I mean, we play Omega on that stage because fuck fighting the Yellow Devil.
Right, and you've never played Mega Man 1, like neither have I, so that's the only way you'd know. Apparently, like, I watched footage of people fighting this guy, though, and this looks like one of the most bullshit boss fights ever. Like, you should actually look it up, anyone that's not seen it, because this looks crazy. And I thought, like, Yellow Devil, you know, like, this could be, like, a K-pop name, like a stage name, so why not throw it in there? So let's see, you got one.
It's got to be at least more than that.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6. 6 out of 10.
Hey, that's pretty
good. That's not bad.
good.
That's much better than I did.
I'll take it. I'm actually impressed that I got that many, considering how many felt like
Considering
really 50-50s.
you're almost zero knowledge on K-pop bands, and unless you have something you're not telling everyone.
I have a K-pop intuition.
Listen,
I suppose.
Like, all jokes aside, like, some K-pop is really catchy. Like, I put on a Spotify playlist one time just driving. We're like, you know what? Let's just listen to some K-pop. And like, man, some of it's like, hell yeah, I'm listening to K-pop.
Some of it's like legitimately like pretty decent. Like I watched recently, like we were just going through music videos, just like if something to have on in the background. Well, I don't know, we're playing a game or doing something else. But that Gangnam Style song came on, and like obviously like it just sort of blew up and like nobody cares about it anymore. But we're listening, like, you know, aside from the music video being kind of silly, it's actually like
catchy,
kind of like a decent song. Like
Psy was actually on the list. He was one of the K-pop guys. I was like, man, should I put Psy on here? But he was the one K-pop idol. I was like, you know what? You're gonna know him if I say that, just because of how prevalent that song was. But I mean, yeah, that song was great.
Yeah, it was good. Jeez. Well, hopefully you followed along with the quiz. If you did, let us know how well you did, and if you had any really dumb justifications for any of your answers.
That's what we want to know. If you let us know the reasoning of why you picked it, that's the most important
absolutely
thing.
Or if you have any K-pop bands to suggest to us, we are more than happy to listen to and provide feedback. But maybe try to stay away from the racist ones. We don't really want to condone that too much. Although I'll be honest, he's probably the one I'm going to go look up right now.
Well, there you go. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the show, please go check us out all over the internet. We are on any podcast service. We're also on Twitter at C&S Podcast. That's at CANDS Pod. And you can also find us on our email account, which is at circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com, where you can let us know your K-pop answers. So until next time, thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you all again in 2 weeks' time for more PlayStation Talk. The intro and outro music for Circles and Squares was produced by friend of the show, Matthew Chan. Interlude music is from Scott Gratton of the Free Music Archive. Our channel art was created by @unreasonable on Twitter, and our brother Alex is the designer of the Circles and Squares logo. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show.